I Could Write a Book by Barrie Mahoney. I did. Indeed, I've written and published 14 books, with some more popular than others. Unlike the days of Dickens, when his stories and that of his contemporaries were eagerly awaited and devoured by an adoring public, reading is not such a popular pastime for many. Watching films and plays on the television and YouTube has continued to dominate time that was previously devoted to enjoying a good book. Rather than read, more and more people nowadays prefer to listen to podcasts and vlogs rather than to read for themselves. Over the last few years, I've noticed that readers much prefer to listen to my podcasts rather than to read the actual article. I haven't got around to producing an audiobook just yet. Maybe that's a project for another day. Does it matter that many readers now prefer to watch and listen rather than to read? I don't think so, just as long as the content attracts the listener's attention, develops an imaginative awareness of the plot, and is enjoyable. Surely that's what it's really about. One of the many joys in my life is writing, and hopefully sharing some joy and maybe amusement with others, be it in written or audio form. I've always written, and later, when I became a teacher, I did my best to encourage my pupils to write too, not only for themselves, but for others. As a young teacher, I remember encouraging pupils to think about the audience that you're writing for. Later on in life, with more experience, I realised that the most successful writing often comes from writing for yourself. If others enjoy it too, then that's a bonus. In the days before COVID and lockdown, and the closure of many independent bookshops, I used to enjoy attending book events and book signings for my latest book. As well as hopefully encouraging sales of my latest book, I particularly enjoyed talking to potential customers, answering questions, and discussing issues raised in the books. Some of the questions were always predictable. For example, I was nearly always asked, and still am, why I killed off Tristan, a much-loved character in my first novel, Journeys and Jigsaws. The explanation is that I had to, since the book is part of a trilogy, and hopefully readers would understand why Tristan had to come to an unfortunate end to allow the story to progress in books 2 and 3. Rarely were they happy or convinced by my answer, and often suggested alternative plots that would allow Tristan to live, preferably forever. In my Living and Working in the Canary Islands and Spain series, I was often asked for advice about which island it would be best to move to, questions about moving pets, buying a property, and motoring issues. It was always heartening to listen to people expressing their hopes and dreams for the future. In my later book, I'd be challenged about my political views and strongly disapproving comments that I expressed about Boris Johnson, the depressing state of the NHS, and post-Brexit UK in general. Sometimes it would lead to a lively debate, but having argued and debated issues surrounding vegetarianism since my time as a primary school pupil, I am rather good at it, so I always enjoyed the challenge. More times than I can remember, conversations would nearly always end with, "Of course, I could write a book." I always nodded and tried to give a little helpful advice, but knowing full well that in most cases it would never happen. At the time of speaking, it was clear that my customers felt quite sure that they had a book inside them, which we all have, but whether they have the discipline, stamina, determination, and perhaps most importantly, the time to start, let alone succeed, is quite another matter. I always used to stress that it's important to write for yourself and to enjoy the process, but I suspect in many cases it was potential fame and fortune that was the vague lure behind the comment. Sadly, the reality is that few truly gifted writers are even recognised, let alone make any money from their endeavours. If you are a celebrity, a politician, or a person of note, then that is a different matter. I understand that apart from the Bible, the most popular book of all time is Prince Harry's Spare, which wasn't even written by him and is, I am told, of doubtful literary quality. It's highly unlikely that it will withstand the passage of time. I am at a stage in my life that I no longer have the demands of newspapers or magazines to write for, and in many ways I now admit that the limitations of time was helpful in the past. Despite this, I still try to find time to write a blog or record a podcast each week, which helps me to remain connected with my readers, many of whom have been following and reading my work for many years. I always make time to write, since nowadays I find it therapeutic, as well as a joy. You have been listening to I Could Write a Book by Barrie Mahoney. Thank you for listening.